Bert Breer with us, and we've been talking a little bit this morning, Bert, about the chatter and the rumblings surrounding Drake Maye and his improvement in practice. I mean, Gerard Mayo said as much yesterday at the podium, said he's doing a great job in practice. Mm-hmm. Teammates are now telling reporters, yeah, he's been doing a great job.
He's the real deal, man. Like I've said this like a couple times. Now, where quarterbacks go always depends on the year and the group of quarterbacks that you're in. But one thing that was pretty consistent in the 6, 8, 10 weeks leading up to the draft was that there are 3 quarterbacks this year that are worthy of going first overall, that in certain years would go first overall.
Yeah.
And so, Jaden Daniels, who I think we all saw how good he is the other night, certainly was somebody who, if there wasn't a Caleb Williams available, could have gone number 1 overall in a lot of drafts, and Drake's in that same boat. They're different, but, I think there's definitely physical ability there that's going to get the attention of guys in practice. And I will say that, the job they've done with him in sequencing him and getting him ready to play, I think has been pretty smart. Just the way they're getting him reps. And there's a hidden thing there with Jacoby that really kind of, I think, illustrates the value of having Jacoby and somebody who's played for Alex Van Pelt before, in that you've heard the 30% number, right?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. 30-70. Yeah. You were the first person to tell us that.
Functionally, the way that works is when they have a play or a concept that Jacoby is comfortable with, that he's run 100 times, that's when they yank him out.
So you first told us this 3 weeks ago. Do you think over the last 3 weeks that's changed at any point where the percentage may be staying the same, but maybe Drake Maye is getting a few more meaningful reps on plays?
I think they're all meaningful. I mean, so you can speak to this better than me, but I think anytime a quarterback is in there with the first team running the Patriots offense against the scout team defense, there's tremendous value.
You get but you get what I'm asking, though, right, Bert? Yeah. In that maybe the plays have changed a little bit in there.
Yeah, and so you're building the library in his head. That's what you're talking about? Yeah. The library's being built up in his head. They also, and the other part of it is, in getting to run the scout team, there's value in that the Patriots defense throws a lot of volume at you, right?
Sure.
So there's a lot of different things they're trying to do. So he gets to see that. It's another chance to look at a real NFL defense. And then, they've split that too, where half the time he's running the scout team, the other half the time Joe Milton's running the scout team, and he's off to the side with T.C. McCartney, the quarterback's coach, working on more Patriot stuff, which, by the way, I did ask about this because it's obvious, when you watch, when we were talking with O'Brien, was this last year when he first got the BC job, right?
What were you talking about?
When we had him on here, I was on.
Oh yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
So I remember asking him, "What'd you do to make Deshaun Watson comfortable?" And he talked about which I'd known this story that he had worked with the Clemson coaches, and he called the Clemson coaches and, "Hey, what'd you do?" The Patriots have North Carolina stuff in now, and there's stuff that Drake's going to be comfortable with because it's stuff that he did in college. So all of that stuff's going on. And, like I said last week, the expectation is he's going to play at some point this year. And I don't mean play like he played last week, actually start games.
So my question is, real quick, say Jacoby goes down middle of the third quarter this week. Mm-hmm. Does Drake have his own package, or is it going to be the same thing?
Yeah, and that's part of it is you have to have that in case of emergency break glass plan, which I think is – there's this, at least as I understand it, there's this, okay, if we have to throw him out there in an emergency situation, what's that going to look like, And that's just to get the guy through a game, And then after that, you got to reset a little bit. But they've been, I think, and I've covered a lot of these, over the years, a lot of different ways of breaking your young quarterback in. How the Bears did it was very creative, and getting Caleb ready and starting to install with him in March and April before they even drafted him. The Patriots have been pretty creative in finding ways to make sure that he gets the sort of miles on his body that he needs before he's going to play.
So if this weekend goes bad,
yep.
Are we going to see Drake Maye start Week 5 against Miami at Gillette?
I don't know if it's time yet for that, but I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I know probably what you're looking at is what the Dolphins have on the other side of the ball right now with Skylar Thompson.
Yeah, it's a winnable game. It's a home game.
Yeah, and their defense.
Head coach knows it.
Their defense hasn't played great, but that's a challenging defense to play against. That's the Ravens' defense.
Well, they got a lot, but they got a lot of challenging defenses. Yeah. It's more about the fact that he'll have a lot of opportunity. I think the Patriots' defense can keep the Dolphins off the field, and you'll have plenty of playing time, and you'll be at home, and there's room there with time of possession to have the ball for much of the day and make mistakes and be able to still be in it.
I think the key is, and this is going to sound boring, but the key is being able to manage down and distance and being able to manage the score. That's what the Commanders have done really well. The Commanders have done a really nice job. If you watch, Jaden Daniels hasn't played from behind a lot this year.
No,
right?
He's also picked up
and he's not,
yards with his legs.
Yeah, and he's not, and they're utilizing him in the run game, and they're giving him easy throws, and everybody's going to latch, and they should. He made some balls out, throws down the field, the two big ones to McLaurin. There was the one to McCaffrey right before the first touchdown, right? Where he threw it into a window. But they're not asking him to do that much. A lot of the stuff that they're asking him to do is underneath and kind of keep moving the chains. And we'll pop one every now and again, but we're not going to ask you to we're not asking you to throw the ball downfield and in cuts and goes and all of that different stuff all game. We'll pull that out every now and again, but more or less, we're going to be asking you to manage situations, and that's, I think, the obvious path to being successful if Drake gets in there.
Drake Maye is a good fit for Alex Van Pelt. Agree or disagree, Bert Breer?
Respectfully, I think there are two things that sort of fly in the face to that.
With all due respect.
With all due respect, as we like to say on this program.
Yeah.
What time did you leave Van Pelt's office today?
Here comes the rip job, Bedard. Listen up.
No, but I think,
respectfully,
knowing what I know about coaches who come out of that system, that offense is built to work for all quarterbacks. And that's the strength of it, is that there's so much flexibility within it that it can support a Brock Purdy in San Francisco as a rookie. It can also maximize an Aaron Rodgers as a 15, 16, 17-year vet in Green Bay.
Yeah.
And so that'd be my first counter to it. My second counter to it, Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson, P.J. Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jeff Driscoll. What do all those guys have in common? They all started games for Alex Van Pelt last year, right? They all started games in that offense last year. And I think that's a reflection of how the offense, when it's run properly, right? That offense is built to support any type of quarterback. It's less reliant, and the Shanahan iteration of that offense is less reliant on what type of quarterback you have. It's more, we're going to build in something for you. Mm-hmm. In other words, take Jared Goff, right? When Jared Goff was in that system, what'd you hear about? Was how Sean was in his headset, ear
till 15 seconds.
All the way down to the 15-second cutoff. Well, what is that? That is replacing the boards on the sideline. You guys, everybody makes fun of the big cartoon boards on the college sidelines. Yeah. You're not going to see those anymore because they have the headset now. But basically what that's doing is that's replacing the boards. Sean McVay was in essence putting the boards back up for Jared Goff, so he could look. So he would have somebody else reading the defense for him. It's just I think they. Again, this comes back to that line that I gave you guys a couple weeks ago, which is, don't tell us how effed up we are until we F it up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I
think that's what some of the staff here took offense to with some of the criticism over the course of the summer, and they're going to say they don't hear any of it. Everybody hears everything, right? So, I do think that there was that part of it, which is how is what you've seen so far look that awful? I don't know. I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. They had a bad week against, I think, one of the 5 most talented rosters in the NFL.
Yeah, but I don't know how you make the assumption that he's bad for Drake Maye. You haven't seen him with Drake Maye.
Right.
And the one time he did adapt, they ran the RPO in the preseason for the touchdown.
So
you don't run that with Jacoby.
Here's the other part of it, that I think you have to remember with somebody like Drake. And this to me, so you guys watched Josh Allen the other night?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
He looked freaking like a freight train.
MVP.
Right? Does not looks like unstoppable now, right? And I think what was so eye-opening about it was most of his plays were from the pocket. like so much of what he was doing was in rhythm and from the pocket. And yes, he made, like, there was the throw to Kincaid in the back of the end zone that was like a scramble play, but for the most part, he was doing a lot of things on schedule, in rhythm, as the offense was called.
Right.
And it just highlights again, and you see Mahomes doing that. It highlights again with, like, this is the model for these sorts of quarterbacks now, which is when they're young, they have the escape hatch of being able to use their athleticism, not just to make plays with their legs, but to extend plays and make plays on the edge as athletes, right? What that does is that buys them time to develop. So that's why you can put those guys in when they're younger, when they don't have it all figured out. It buys them the time to develop. So when Drake does get in there, you're going to put stuff in that's going to make him comfortable, that he was comfortable with at North Carolina. You're also going to give him, like, hey, like, if the first read in that progression isn't there, go make a play.
Right.
And it's not that you want him doing it all the time, but it does at least give him that escape hatch where in the long run, it buys you time. It bought Mahomes time to develop into a better pocket passer. It bought Josh Allen time to develop into a pocket passer. And ultimately, the hope is those guys become players playing a game that's more sustainable. But in the time being, you let them go and be athletes, which allows you to be successful in the short term while they develop over the long term.
And I think the best thing about Allen, he got away from Dayball, multiple coordinators now, and they retooled the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
And going into the year, I'm thinking, okay, Buffalo's going to be down this year.
Oh, man.
No, he elevated them.
No, and you know, I think there's similarity to Brady in 10. When they traded Moss, and I remember talking to people, in the organization then about like how they thought it would actually make Brady a better player. And it sounded crazy at the time, but they traded for Deion Branch, and I remember someone saying to me there, an offensive coach saying to me there, Tom is at his best when all 5 guys are alive on every play. All 5 skill guys are alive on every play. When he is making the defense defend every blade of grass out there. And that's what Josh did, right? Like that's what Josh, like without having to look over every 3 or 4 plays. And this is nothing against Stephon Diggs, who I think is a fantastic player, but not having to look over there every 3 or 4 plays and be like, have I gotten him the ball?
Or deal with him in a huddle.
Right. Like, or like, oh, well, I got to force it here. Or we got to do something to get him the ball. Not having to do that liberates him, And so he's able to have every guy alive for him on every single play, which makes him, I think, ultimately in the long run, that's going to make him much harder to defend.
617-779-0985. We'll get to your calls in a moment. I do want to ask you this. Do you think there's hesitation on the part of Alex Van Pelt to go to Drake Maye, and he has a head coach in Drake Maye who's eager to get to Drake Maye? Is there a divide there developing?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think, I think a lot of this has been about trying to make sure that the changes they've made stick, and like not wanting to throw the guy into a 12-car pileup. And, it's having the confidence that if he has a really rough game where he takes 6 or 7 sacks, whatever it is, and gets hit a dozen times, like that's not going to undo a lot of the things that they've been working with him on. And that's a real concern. That's something that you have to kind of keep an eye on. That's also something that they have to feel comfortable that they can manage with the personnel that they have out there, right? Like that they feel like they're good enough around him to manage that. And Washington, for example, Washington's biggest problem coming into the season was his tackle situation, right? So like Washington has some of the same problems,
all these teams,
but they've been able to effectively manage it. Yeah. So you can manage those things. It's just getting to a point where it's like, okay, like we've got a pretty clear vision of how we want this thing to run, and this is going to give us a chance to keep the guy on his feet.
I think the word divide, I think that's like a negative word. I just think there's a security with Van Pelt. Like every time he talks about Brissett, like, oh yeah, he's the guy. Yeah. He's the guy. Mm-hmm. And it's going to come down to Mayo.
Well, Brissett's going to run his offense. And that's a common thing. I wouldn't disagree with that.
But it feels like Mayo's getting closer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is not sourced or anything. I just when I watched Gerard talk about Maye in his you can see the confidence that he has. Yeah. Like he just listening to him talk about Drake, I just feel like he thinks, and you don't know until you see him out there, but I think he thinks they got it right.
Yeah, coaches play the best guys.
Yeah.
period.
Hey, if you like that clip, check out more videos from Zolak and Bertrand right here. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.